while. We last recorded third week in December or something like that.
Good
And
times.
now
Yeah.
we are here, beginning of 2025, and we decided to mix things up a little bit. So,
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
is it too late to say that?
No, before 10, still before
Not if you're
10.
in China.
Nice. Okay, so yeah, we decided to put this into a live format and the primary reason behind that and thinking was to invite some of our audience to ask some questions and maybe just hang out and listen to us shoot the breeze, as Patrick would say, live. And so maybe for people that haven't tuned in before or not listened to an episode, I think most people that probably hear probably have, but each week we dive into funding, market, and investors' takes in the AEC space. And yeah, guys, if you want to get involved, feel free to put some messages in the live chat. Also, we put an event out each week on LinkedIn, so add some comments there. We have some Q&A coming up, and there's an interesting question which we will debate about who is the most handsome host. So brace yourselves. Okay, Martin and Patrick, are you ready?
Let's
Yes.
go. When
Yeah.
I have questions that I don't dare asking to Martin's face, can I also post them in the LinkedIn stream?
I can, I do it now.
Yeah, Martin is a boxer. I wouldn't dare upsetting you too much.
No, or only retired. Owen is a Muay Thai fighter, or who? No, MMA,
Jiu-jitsu, jiu-jitsu.
Jiu-Jitsu.
Jiu-jitsu. Okay,
Yeah.
wow.
And you're the
You know,
tallest.
Jiu-Jitsu always reminds me that is actually the first class that Neo in the first Matrix movie gets downloaded from to fight Morpheus, if you guys remember. That was actually Jiu-Jitsu.
Well, I never knew. Maybe that was the inspiration. Oh, hey, Mo. Mo is here. What is up?
Morris
Nice.
here.
Okay, guys, today we're going to dive into 1,5 and their latest 150 million euro pre-IPO round. We did discuss previously about how 2025 would be the year of IPOs, and it feels
Hmm.
like actually the subject is coming up quite a little bit more in our discussions on here,
That's
which
true.
is cool. We're then going to talk about some content or subject area that Patrick has been exploring on Practical Nerds about fixed versus variable costs and what that might mean for your startup. And then we have the Q&As, which we will get to. So let's dive into 1,5. Martin, do you want to
Yeah, so 1,5 pre-IPO startup, I guess. I guess is it going public on the German stock market?
Probably undecided. I think that's something
Okay.
that the company will have to figure out.
Okay, but still in Germany, right? And it secures 150 million euros pre-IPO, and they call themselves Virtual Power Plant. So Heartbeat AI purchases electricity at the spot market when the prices are the lowest and sells excess electricity back to the grid when prices are the highest. Um, what is interesting about 1,5, I think, is that like we talked before, they acquired like 30 startups or something like that, and that's
Companies, yep.
companies,
something in the region? Yeah.
and that seems to be their business model. So, Patrick, over to you. What is 1,5?
Yeah, let me perhaps set the scene a little bit. I need a little bit of table space to unpack and maybe
Mm-hmm.
let's first landscape. What is the landscape? So the scene is, think of the solar slash PV market for residential buildings in Europe. Specifically, where 1,5 started was Germany, but they have branched out from outside Germany. They even have business in Australia now. So think of, let's say, Europe. Solar PV, putting that on the roofs of residential homes, so so-called rooftop PV. Um, that is a market that obviously, unless you were living under a rock or behind the moon or whatever, you know what this is. And this is the business of, okay, homeowners want to produce energy, electricity specifically, more decentrally. They want to decouple their energy cost from the rising costs that come from central power generation as well as the distribution of said power generation. So they want to gain a higher level of autarky energy autarky, motivated by CO2 neutral, but as close to that as it gets. So that's been a big topic. It has received a lot of subsidies over the last 20 years, which have slowly phased out. Solar/PV has reached the so-called grid parity a few years ago. Grid parity means that 1 kilowatt hours produced through a rooftop PV has been as cheap and now is officially cheaper than a centrally produced and distributed um, kilowatt hour through a traditional fossil power plant. So that's great, which means that there is actually a business case and not just an ecological case
Mhm.
for PV. It just makes sense. And that's why the subsidies also were able to slowly be phased out. That's the market in which the German unicorn NPAL used to play for, I believe, now maybe or close to 9 years. So the NPAL is a unicorn, and maybe it's about 9 years old at this time. And 1,5 was a latecomer to this market. So they were founded by Philipp Schröder and his team in 2021. And Philip was previously a part of the European team at Tesla. Before that, he was part of the team at Sonnen, which was another PV company here in Germany. And so he and his co-founders founded 1,5 in 2021 to attack that solar PV market. There are a few bottlenecks that Philip saw. One of them was the installation capacity. In order to actually get all the demands satisfied with proper workforce supply. Another bottleneck that Philips saw was that at some point you need proper control software in order to potentially create virtual power plants. Another big topic. And the third one was the actual distribution of both the workforce as well. Sorry, the distribution of the PV as well as the acquisition of the workforce. And that's where 1,5's uniqueness in the model set. 1,5 was actually founded on what I would call a private equity play rather than a VC play, because Philip's spiel was, hey, let me raise enough capital, at first mostly equity, but then transitioning more and more and more into cheaper debt, in order to acquire other solar installation companies that are more regional, but that have excellent capabilities for solar PV and sometimes even electromechanical capabilities, that have an order book, that have existing workforce, that maybe have needs for succession planning, etc. And that is from a financial playbook quite interesting, because the multiple that you can get for a company with a tech angle is most likely in all of the cases higher than the multiple you would be paying for a traditional solar installation company with an excellent workforce. And that was the whole model that Philip went to market with 4 years ago. And since then, the company has acquired multiple traditional installers throughout Germany, throughout Europe, etc. And that way has reached, according to the self-publications or the publications here, several hundred million of annual revenue. So the company grew and is EBITDA profitable as far as I know, because it is acquiring traditional businesses through more of a PE model, but with a tech angle. So that's the scene here.
Mm.
Mhm.
I find it fascinating actually, because from the outside, and it looks like, it feels like a startup, but would you classify it as a startup? Because yes, it has only been going for a few years, but like you say, it doesn't follow the traditional VC model. It's more of a PE model, and like Martin said earlier, has acquired something like 30-ish companies since only being founded in 2021.
I mean, VC is much smaller than startup. Startup is it's a much bigger set of companies, and so if you define startup by, um, it starts on a green field. It has relatively low scale initially, and it has a ton of risk: market risk, customer risk, technology risk. Yeah, then hell yeah, absolutely, 1,5 was a startup. What I'm saying is maybe it wasn't a venture case, or the VC model wasn't fit for 1,5 because it has a different path to growth. Not better, not worse. Just in this case, it was a different model. But yeah, absolutely, it was a startup.
Mhm. Where are you looking at 1,5 for a potential investment?
Yeah, you're driving the knife, Martin. Thank you. So
Reveal
Philip,
everything. You're
Philip,
live.
Philip and I were discussing about me investing into 1,5 late 21 and early 2022. We had great conversations. I respect the hell out of him. He has very strong spikes as a founder, in my personal opinion, and the background checks that I did, etc. He also has weaknesses like every human, but he has very exceptional spikes. And so the Ukraine war started in February 2022. And at the time, I was unsure about how the solar market was going to develop. I was unsure how the energy market was going to develop. And the valuation that Philip received on the round that I was looking at eventually was so high that I didn't think I could actually extract sufficient enough return potential for our fund. So he priced himself and his company for that very, very early round, just out of the realm of what I think I could realize as a fund returning potential. Plus, the market risk in the solar space was back then and still is, in my opinion, relatively high. Now, if I know your next question, Martin. Do you regret it? So let me just preempt it. Financially, maybe, um, but returns need to be risk adjusted. And here, the solar and PV market. I come from energy. Many people know this. So it's just not a market I want to play in. And sometimes you have to pass on opportunities if you're not the right investor fit for the company, the valuation doesn't fit, etc. So financially, it could have made profits for us. It very, very likely would not have actually returned my fund. So these are the instances where, as a VC, you have to sometimes be very disciplined.
Okay, thank you. Maybe a bit technical question here, like financially, but if the company is found was at 450 million pre-IPO, it was founded up to 450.
Funding, yeah.
Yeah. Can you like assess what's the market cap of it once it is on the stock exchange, or that's not possible?
So a company like this, okay, so let me respond in two steps, Martin. So the 450 million, just for everybody's context, is not pure equity funding as far as I know. And it also makes sense because 1.5 would be well served to actually raise a lot of debt in order to finance acquisitions. That's just a financial leverage play that you can do in their growth model. So raising 450 million of equity, I don't think that's what's being meant here. And I also don't think, but I don't have privileged knowledge here. That's just my personal assumption. The 150 also is not only equity. It serves the company just better if you just raise enough equity that you need in order to unlock the portion of debt that you want. So most likely the 450 is a smaller portion of equity and a larger portion of debt. So just for context. To your question, a company like this in the end needs to be priced by IPO bank that can gain because you will be valued like an asset heavy company. You will be valued like a capex heavy company. And the more software you can implement, the more recurring revenue you can implement, the better distribution channels and more efficient distribution channels you can implement, the more story you can tell about things like virtual power plant that will help you push the multiple up, but not by orders of magnitude. So that's probably where you're going to land. And a company, that means that if he makes 1 billion in revenue, he probably has a multi-corn IPO case, as long as he stays EBITDA profitable.
Okay, we got some.
Um, I think some questions from the
Yeah.
audience here. We have one from Alex. It says, "Where does distinctive tech come into play? The increase install productivity with the small subs or the virtual power plant?"
Yeah. So here, my knowledge of 1.5's latest model is it's just 20 months outdated or 24 months even outdated. So Alex, what I cannot respond to what 1.5 would have today on technology. Um, so let me rather respond with, let's say, a broader market response of what I've been seeing from similar companies as a total set. And most of the companies actually have certain software in order to drive internal operational efficiency with workforce, which is not software that you would expose to the clients or software that would be shiny and blingy, but it's software that is extremely important because in a workforce heavy model like this, you need to achieve 65% plus utilization of your workforce. and that is after holidays, sick days, training days, etc., and travel, in order to drive truly positive contribution margins on the installation level. And for that, there are a few levers how you achieve that. So between the local installations, whereas and that defines how many installations you can do per day per installer. That drives the utilization. And this and for that bundling of local orders, you need fantastic software to actually do good routing, and you need fantastic software to actually then help your workers very, very quickly go through the checklist items and have a very standard operating procedure that they go through the software. So there, to the internal workforce exposure, the software is very important for companies that want to have that level of utilization. And another one that Philip was back then pitching very heavily, and I assume that is a focus for 1,5 still today, is the control software of the assets that they are installing. So let's say the PV 1,5 is also in the heat pump business by now, and then they want to build a virtual power plant. So if you want to maintain that kind of a story, you will have to have software. Now, there were publications in Germany that 1,5's control software was actually not their own, but it was actually um, bought from a different software vendor or licensed from a different software vendor. I don't know if that is still the case, or I don't know if that news article was correct, but there was the news out there that on the control software, they just buy from someone else for.
I think there may be a little bit of lag in the last little bit there, but yeah, we get it. We've also got Mo. Do you guys know of any one? I forgot the name of the company. 1,5 copies in the US.
One and a half.
1.5 copies.
That's what I read
Yeah,
earlier, and I said, "What the hell is he talking about?" Yeah,
US equivalents.
we got you more now. So, is there a 1,5 copy in the US or some states in the US, or also if there is something in the Europe, perhaps similar to 1,5?
Yeah. So the short answer is I don't think you can copy 1,5 for one specific reason, and that's the founder. I'll come back to this to Philipp
Hmm.
Schröder specifically. The model itself, you can try to copy it, and Mo, I'll get back to you via WhatsApp on potential peers in the US. I would have to consult now my US colleagues in our CRM. As you know, I don't cover the US market for Fundamental, but I'll get back to you. I promise on that. But I don't think you can copy the model. And the secret sauce here in 1,5 is Philip. Philip is in my personal opinion, this is purely just Patrick Hellerman, personal opinion. I
Mm-hmm.
think Philip is a marketing genius. And I think Philip is
Mm.
also very charismatic, um, leader of a company that is absolutely IPO worthy. He has a lot of stage presence. He has strong awareness of how to generate buzz about his company, and he also doesn't shy away to generate buzz more buzz. Using controversial incidents in order to, apart from other skills that he has as the CEO of this company, that is just truly exceptional. It's not something that you get a lot. Now, whether you like it, whether you want to be part of his ride, etc., um, you like the tactics or not, that's personal preference. But if you just reduce it to the effectiveness for the company, it's very, very effective. And so that works in this kind of, or that is very important to 1,5 because 1,5 needs to be a brand play in order to be an IPO case. In my opinion, if you make it a boring utility or you make it a boring workforce management company, you're shooting for a strategic or a PE exit, which is not going to give you the multiple that you want, etc., etc. You need this to be a brand play, in my opinion, in order to be an IPO case. You need someone that can spin narratives and
Mm.
will them into existence, talk them into existence, which, in my opinion, Philip has done.
Mhm.
I think we will get on to some similar plays because believe that Philip may have at one point been inspired by the beef between Kanye West and 50 Cent in 2007.
What was that about?
It was like a marketing
How
play.
so?
Yeah.
So, Martin, do you have the article on your
Yeah.
share
So
screen?
you, Patrick, said charismatic marketing genius, and uh, at
So there
some
was
point,
some beef on LinkedIn, as far as I'm aware,
uh,
between him and a competitor.
yeah. So com 1,5 is not allowed to call itself market leader for climate protection technology, and I think the background was that there was another company, and
NPAL.
Enpal, that sold much more installations than 1,5, and there was a court case that I think 1,5 lost, and they cannot call themselves market leader because they simply did less sales than the real market leader.
Martin, I know you have some interesting takes on this.
Interesting takes. Well, I think I was just actually curious because I don't know if it's German courts that like who picked it up, and is it because like in the UK I find there's like so many companies or people claiming something like the best, like saying the best or market leader as an example, or like whatever that is, and this just goes without any substance, right?
Repercussions.
Exactly, and the customer is there to judge if a company is their market leader or the best or not. And obviously, the customer most of the time is not a specialist in the field, and um, yeah, and it just sometimes well, it's annoying, really. That's what I want to say.
So I will not offer an opinion on this. I will not tell you where I stand on the side of the argument, whether this is good practice or bad malpractice or whatever. I will not tell you where I stand. I'll just offer I'll try to offer a objective observation here.
Mm.
So in this case that you brought up here, Martin, I believe it was a regional competitor, the CEO of a regional competitor, that noticed that 1,5 on their website used this term, market leader for climate protection technology, and so prove that it is, and it's very hard to prove that it is not. But it is certainly a fair observation that if you make claims that also need to be factual as much as they can be, as long as they seem to be objective to a client. And that is what the regional competitor he has litigated for, and apparently received positive approval by the German courts that this is not a fact based claim and is objectively
Mhm.
not correct. And so it should not be used in customer marketing. That's important, not just because, so it was a competitor that brought this up, but actually the courts are interested in this not because of competitive reasoning. They are interested in it more because of customer protection, because the
Yes.
customers in the sense of customer protection, the authorities pay attention that the customers are not being manipulated, confused, etc. And whatever claim you make that is appearing to be factual or objective needs to be factual and objective. And within marketing, there is allowed a zone outside of that, which is obvious embellishment, or it can't be proven factually, etc. That's a different case. But here, apparently, the court thought that was not the case.
Hmm. Hmm.
What's also
Yeah,
quite funny
and to bring
is,
it back into the
go on.
context, Philip is everything that I know about Philip. He has several exceptional spikes, and marketing and PR is one of them. And that's something that you actually, for an IPO case in a market like this, can benefit from in your company.
Hmm. Okay.
I think also funny. What's funny at the bottom of the article is that he mentions that he loves competition, and that him and the founder of the other company speak daily.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Um,
I have one more
Yeah,
actually on
maybe they
this.
shout at each other. I don't know.
maybe they plan PR, and like
Maybe.
what rifts can we put out to cement and grow our position in the market?
Yeah. And so
Right? I mean, that's right, right? I mean, that's one of the principles of PR. Like, if you're boring, at some point you're running out of steam. So sometimes you do have to create also a little bit of controversy. I mean, that's something that people have done.
all PR is good PR, and it's proved. It's proved because we're talking about him now.
You just there is this fantastic movie. I forgot what it. Sorry, we're doing a little bit movie fun facts today. um, Major League was an 80s movie about a failing Major League Baseball team in Cleveland, etc. And there's one quote that I will never forget from this old guy that teaches the young gun the ropes of the business, and he says, and so the young guy just pitched a very very bad game, like terrible game, didn't hit any of his pitches, etc. And then they go out in the evening for a drink, and someone wants the young guy's autograph. And the young guy is like, what the fuck, why do you want my autograph? And so he gives him the autograph, says thank you, blah blah. And he asks the old guy, Tom Berenger, and so Charlie Sheen, and then asked Tom Berenger, and he said, I don't understand, I thought you had to be good to be famous. And so the old guy just said him, no, you only have to be relevant.
Mm.
It's
Wow.
a good
Okay.
lesson.
Good
That's a
lesson.
very good lesson. Maybe I need to work on some things to become more relevant.
Okay, back to energy. So if the if they are buying energy when the prices are low and they are selling at the higher market prices, is the business model slightly not vulnerable from government's point of view, that if the energy prices are going up, obviously this difference between buying and selling probably it's obviously probably stays at the same level. The ratio is pretty much similar, but in case that the prices are going up and people are kind of screaming that there is that people and they don't have money to pay for electricity, then in that case there might be some push towards people like 1,5, because they're basically making money on the differences between the lower prices and the higher prices of electricity. Is it not relevant thing?
You're picking one subset of the potential of a potential future business expansion of 1,5, and that is the virtual power plant that would be marketed to the wholesale market. So now we're getting a bit technical
Mhm.
into energy markets, Martin. But let me just explain. So one business of 1,5 is, let's sell and install rooftop PV to building owners.
Mhm.
That's where they also compete with NPAL, for example. Another business is, let's do the exact same thing for heat pumps. So let's sell and install heat pumps to building owners. There, you can, but you don't have to have an operating component. So as 1,5, you don't have to be the operator of said assets. And a PV anyway doesn't need operation other than making sure that the energy or the current flows um, correctly, and that it gets fed into the grid, or not fed into the grid, but there's no steering component to it. To a heat pump there slightly is, but in general all of that locally produced power is either used locally, or whatever is excess is being fed into the grid, but with no virtual power plant to it. A virtual power plant, so that is the other business side that you are now referencing, is when, if you dumb it down, basically means I have control software for multiple decentral power generation assets and demand assets. So the power generation asset would be the rooftop PV. It would be heat pump, sorry, power. And so these can be used grid between input and so that I typically market in two markets in energy. I market it in the balancing energy markets, and I market it in the wholesale energy markets. For that, I need a license. I need to be a licensed virtual power plant operator. I need to be recognized as an entity that can bid in the balancing energy markets and that
Mhm.
can be bought in the wholesale energy markets. And in that market, you're correct, I actually make my money on the spread between what it costs me to produce and distribute, and what someone pays me for the kilowatt hour. And so there, the higher the spread, the higher the volatility, the better for a company that actually runs a virtual power plant. If you know what you're doing, if you run a tight ship on the trading side, etc. The more stable the energy prices become, usually you can make less spread. So there it becomes much closer to a trading business.
Yeah, yeah. I just think like in the light of increasing energy prices throughout Europe and having like very bad insulated homes in many cases, it might be someone might say that, oh, these companies cannot make money on people, and the business model kind of vanishes straight away, or it can be limited to certain amount of spread between the buy and sell. So but it just obviously imagine. I just imagine this scenario, so it's not something
I mean,
that's real.
it's not a business that you should underestimate. It depends on how much scale you can have on it. So when I worked for Eon, the world's largest investor-owned utility, um, Eon had a complete trading business unit that made billions in profit every year just by purchasing energy and reselling energy on the wholesale market. Think of it like an investment banking division just
Yeah,
for energy. So obviously the wheel that you're moving there, the wheel that you're turning there is very, very high if you have the capitalization. Now, if you're limited to having a couple thousand or couple 10,000 of single family homes and their assets, you're not a relevant player in
I
that
agree.
market. It's just
Yeah,
not the scale. So that's something where you have to be 100 to 1,000 times bigger in order to be at that size of a trader.
yeah. So it's not something that just emerged. It's been going on for decades, perhaps. The energy trading.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Um, shall we move on to fixed versus variable costs and maybe
How,
some takeaways from the practical nerds?
how about we touch on the question from Amal?
Let's go to that one at the end because it's more of a open question, a bit
Okay,
more generic.
sounds good.
We'll keep to the subject. Just one other point that I think what would be very interesting from maybe me and hopefully our audience would be to maybe do an episode on mergers and acquisitions as a growth strategy because it's not something that comes up too often in certainly the tech world, and if you're or at least not on my path.
Yeah, I think we both hear it for the first time. Like someone buys 30 companies and
Yeah,
goes
I
public,
mean, you
basically.
you, sh- you should just litigate 1,5, get Philip's attention, and then invite him on the podcast.
Hmm.
here we go.
Should we bash him more on the
Yeah,
marketing
let's do it. Then we get a masterclass in M&A as a result.
and marketing? Okay.
To be fair, that's something he would probably really like and respect.
That is not apparently you have to litigate.
Okay, so we go on fixed and variable costs. So, Patrick, on Monday, I believe you guys released an episode talking about fixed and variable costs and why you should have mostly fixed costs in your production operation. Is that correct?
Yes, that was a question.
Did you catch me, Patrick?
Yeah,
Oh,
now I think I have. Sorry, there's a typical "let's go live on LinkedIn" lag that Shu and I were having when we did live episodes on Practical Nerd. So this is thanks Microsoft for a great product and infrastructure. um, uh, okay, so here let me just give the main message because this is something that can be very financially nerdy and maybe it can also because of that be less interesting for several people. So I'll just try to hone it down on the message.
mm,
So um, in a pre-SaaS era, most companies, when they produce something and sell something, would produce with a lot of cost of goods sold. And that means that it's difficult to scale because the more you scale your revenue, the more you scale the cost to produce your revenue. One of the exceptions to that pre-SaaS was media content. Think the Gutenberg Bible. I produced the content for the Bible once. I set up my Bible printing press, and now I could print it for as little incremental production cost as possible. I could distribute it relatively easily. And so that means that if that had been a revenue business, my revenue would scale much faster than my cost. That's what SaaS, the enterprise SaaS especially, or software as a service also outside enterprise, was, right? I mean, finally, someone was able to produce at the benefits of software, but now get a lot of recurring revenue. So I was converting a lot of variable cost into fixed cost in my own P&L. But the problem with that, or the limitation of that approach is, and why I find it so fascinating in the context of AEC, is, well, but you're selling fixed cost as well, because the license you're selling to your customer, the number of seats, or maybe it's a flat pricing where you can have as many seats as you want. Let's say you're selling into an enterprise your software for 100,000 a year. That's 100,000 a year, but that doesn't scale with the revenue of your customer. So whether your customer doubles their revenue, triples their revenue, or whatever, the price will still be 100,000 for your software. So it's great that you converted variable cost into fixed cost, but you did not scale with the revenue of your customer, except a few exceptions in software. And one of them is cloud infrastructure. The other one is payments infrastructure.
Mm.
Because here you would produce fixed cost, as in, okay, I need to develop the product once. It's not entirely true. Of course, I need to do updates, maintenance, et cetera, et cetera. But for the sake of the argument, it works easier this way. You produce once, you set up the infrastructure once. You have a little bit of variable cost of processing power, storage power, etc., but negligible. But you sell it as a variable cost item in your customer's P&L, because as the customer does more payments processing, because you get a 0.1%, 0.15% cut of the transaction volume, your revenue scales with the revenue of the customer. So the scissor between your production cost and the variable cost that you sell into the customer, which is your revenue, goes up and up and up and up. And that is the true interesting function that if you can unlock it, you're probably building a generational company. And in construction, we're seeing these exact models. It's just that founders get absolute shit advice from VCs all the time, because VCs are still stuck in a SaaS era because they have no fucking clue of construction. They give the same bad advice over and over again with the confidence of a Caucasian white male of, beating my chest, I'm enterprise SaaS and I've done this in enterprise SaaS. But maybe you should just stop talking about what you did and start thinking about first principles. Okay. And then stop talking about with so much confidence bad advice. And that is enterprise SaaS in construction is not always the default. It can be the default, but it is not always the default. Construction customers love to buy outcomes. And outcomes in the P&L of the construction industry get purchased as variable cost. They scale with the revenue that you push through a project. More revenue, I need more outcomes. So guys, produce fixed cost, but sell variable cost, because our industry is poised for buying variable cost. But if you produce enterprise SaaS and you sell it as fixed cost, you're not gaining the benefits of the scissor that our industry presents you. That's my plea.
So I've got a lot of pushback
Sorry,
on
I
this.
just have one thing. We said we didn't mention before we go live, but no swearing, please.
Oh, sorry. Do we have children on
Oh,
the line?
yeah, totally.
Yeah, so it's super interesting subject, and so the customers, they hate when people scale their revenues with their revenue. So if the software like it's like a progressive charge on how much like construction volume I make, then it depends on that is rendering how much I have to pay for the software. I think this is a Procore model, right? That you that Procore is asking you what's your turnover or revenue, and then they will give you a bill accordingly, right?
Martin, I think you're exactly correct, but you need to hear me on one thing. You need to sell the outcome.
That's what I
If
was
you're
going to. That's what I know that. I know that. Yes. So there's two things, right? One is the outcome, which I don't think Procore gives you outcome, charging this
exactly,
way. But then another thing is, like you said, there is the scale of the revenue, but there is outcome associated to that, yeah? Which is actually something
exactly.
I've not thought about in the past. So that's super interesting. Are there any examples of companies doing that?
So robotics is a great example of doing exactly that, because on-site robotics, I should say. So you guys did the super series with Monumental. So let's use them, but it's not the only example. I think the same could be said about, for example, Kevin with Canvas. So Monumental has a bricklaying rope. So today it's a bricklaying robotics company. Long term it's something else, but today it's a bricklaying robotics company. What do they do? Today, if you want to produce a brick wall, you're producing with variable cost. Why? Because you're paying an hourly wage to a worker that is putting 500 bricks a day into place, puts mortar in between, etc. More bricks means more hours, means more wage. That's a variable cost item in how you produce revenue. With a robot, you're converting that into fixed cost because you're taking all of that away, because the robot doesn't ask you for holidays. They don't ask you for a pay raise. They don't ask you for overtime fees. Nothing of that. The robot costs you the exact same thing, whether you lay 100 or 500 or 1,000 bricks a day. So you've just converted variable costs into fixed costs. What does your customer buy? Variable cost, because they pay you per brick. That is the norm in this industry. They want you to sell them the outcome, guarantee me that you put the wall in place, and I will pay you for the wall. And if it's 1,000 bricks, it's this price. And if it's 10,000 bricks, it's this price. So you're producing fixed cost and you're selling variable cost. And that's how you get actually all the spread of a generational infrastructure company.
Okay, so I'll give you my intuition, and please push back on this. I think it will work for the first movers, and the second, third will not be able to do it, and the market will then uh, will be lowering the prices because there will be people, like there's a saying, your margin is my opportunity, right? So if people will be increasing their revenue accordingly, then there will be other people, other companies coming and reducing this margin by competing with them.
I think your intuition is correct. And I think it's a very smart intuition, actually, because it goes into how industries transform. So here, the opportunity in AEC, and which is why I get so annoyed with shit investor advice from people who know they don't know, but they start talking in spite of not knowing, is right now, and probably for the foreseeable future, people can buy generational companies if they find a model that allows you to produce fixed cost and sell variable cost, because the industry is still at a state where customers, their whole company infrastructure, their processes, workflows, governance, behaviors is not yet tuned to assuming the risk of technology and abandoning the risk transfer of buying outcomes, because that's essentially what buying outcomes is. You're transferring execution risk from your company, a GC for example, or subcontractor, to your external supplier. And in a project-based model like ours, where risk is behind every corner, and delays and all the financial penalties that come associated with that, this industry has grown by transferring risk to other parties that are more competent, parties that are more focused. That's how you get 100 suppliers on a work site on a given day, etc. And that is the ingrained model in this industry. It's not the case in manufacturing. It's not the case in retail. It's not the case anywhere. It's in this industry, which is why this model is perfect in this industry. But to your point, Martin, as this industry matures, as it learns to relay its pipes, its infrastructure, as the people become better at predicting the outcomes of tooling, of software, of new infrastructure, as they trust that they are able to operate it in the new processes that they have built, less and less outcomes will be bought. That doesn't mean we go to zero outcomes just because the project model requires you to transfer risk to a degree, but certain risks might not be transferred anymore. And that's exactly, in my opinion, what you are saying, Martin, that I have to agree with. So now is the window of opportunity where you can build generational companies like that, but maybe in 10 years not.
Hmm.
Very good. Guys, we have maybe 5 or so minutes left. Shall we go into some of the
Sorry, I'm
Q&A?
really monologuing.
That's okay.
Which one? So, where should we start? So, Amal, you asked the question about how is the SMB market for construction tech SaaS in India. Maybe we should invite Shubon in the
Hmm.
next few weeks or so to answer that one. I'm sure
Yeah,
that's
I
an
don't
interesting.
think I'm. You want the OG, Aman. I'm not that. So we'll get Shubon.
Silly
Yeah, we will.
question. Sorry. SMB.
Small
Small,
and
medium.
medium-sized businesses.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay. Underwhelming.
uh, okay, so Anne Mugo asked, how do you see the upcoming IPO of 1.5 impacting the AEC tech landscape? Who wants to go first?
Martin.
Patrick, please go on.
Okay. So 1.5 is only adjacent to AEC, which is also why, for example, in the quarterly statistics that we publish here at Fundamental, we're not using 1.5 or NPAL as counting into AEC, just because this is more of energy
Mm,
than it is a construction type business. But there is obvious adjacency, which is also why we are picking it for today. But I wouldn't call it pure play AEC, and I wouldn't even call it 50% AEC. But that's just a contextualization comment. In general, I don't think 1,5 will be able to IPO in 2025. I have no proprietary insight here. I have market insight, but not into 1,5. I think the company is more likely to find its window perhaps in 26, 27, and a few things still have to break your way in order to make that window. But if and when it happens, it's always positive. It's always liquidity events are the lifeblood of this industry, because we're such a sorry, by this industry I mean venture capital. We're such a we're an industry that binds capital for such a long time that truly when liquidity events happen, this is what unlocks um, more capital flowing in. And you heard me talk about this a lot. It's always a flywheel. It's great capital attracts great founders and great talent. Great founders and great talent attract great customers. More customers attract great traction, which attracts more capital, and it's a flywheel. And so the liquidity events here will attract more capital again, more people, etc. And also we're breeding more talent, right? So the more funding you get into exceptional companies, the more talent you will get into it, and you're creating a new pool of people that will found the next generation of companies. And for that, 1,5 is one of the ones that will help the ecosystem.
Also, if you're interested in the IPO market within AEC Tech, it's worth checking out Service Titan, which was the back end of last year, right? But also predicted this year, infra market and equipment share. I think is one that's
Oh yeah.
potentially. I don't know if you guys are aware of any others that might
I mean,
IPO
in
this
India,
year.
we have a pipeline. So that work might, off business might, I don't know about Moglix. Blackbuck just did. So that's in the logistics space, not AEC, but something that we cover here at Fundamental as well. I haven't talked to the investors of Mano Mano, but let's not forget Mano Mano. Mano Mano is a pretty interesting construction materials e-commerce company, also a unicorn here in Europe, has reached substantial scale. Maybe they're preparing one.
Mm. Okay, next question. Derek asks who is the most handsome host, and I will just answer this quickly and say if you're watching Bricks and Bytes to look at the hosts, you're probably in the wrong place. Should we go to Anton's question? Anton,
I
last.
mean,
Hey, but you
Patrick,
no no
Patrick
sorry,
is the
but
tallest. Patrick is the tallest. So,
Patrick is the tallest, and I think Owen, you might be the most athletic in your current state, but I think
oh,
Martin
excuse me.
has the most sexy body for the other gender. I have to say.
Very nice, very nice. Okay, last one
Oh,
quickly.
I'm blushing.
Big guns.
That's
Yeah.
fine.
Anton Marinovich, he asks, what are some emerging trends in construction technology sales that you find particularly interesting or promising? So I will go and I'm quite interested in the role of AI agents and how they may impact sales. They touch a lot of the sales process, from lead generation through to, I mean, some even do calls now. I don't know whether how good that would go down in a construction industry which is heavily reliant on relationships as opposed to someone talking to a AI for a phone. I don't know. I couldn't speculate on that. But even from something that I've been experienced personally is transcripts from calls that you have with potential customers, uploading them into AI tools, and you almost get a sales coach to give you like some real solid feedback on pain points, and so on and so forth. So that's one that's exciting me. How about you guys?
Patrick,
Sorry, we're trying to
it's very difficult to
play each
excite me.
other. Okay. I can do a very long answer here, but Anton, I'll try to be concise. On-site robotics, 1, data infrastructure and ERPs, 2, authoring tools, 3. And by the way, with authoring tools, it's not just design stage. Actually, authoring tools happen for the construction stage as well, sometimes unknowingly or less
Oh,
known. So,
Patrick, the question was about sales. Sales,
specifically about sales.
sales
I got it.
trends. If you have any, that is.
Sales trends. Um, Okay, now I also understand your response better, Owen. I had been very close to pulling the trigger on a lead automation and new age CRM for construction companies, which I really loved. I do think what Joist, Anton, shout out
Mhm.
what Joist is doing can potentially be
Ah,
very
this is why he
interesting.
plugged the question.
Staged.
That's fine. Hey,
Cut,
I mean,
cut.
we talked about Philip, right? I mean, marketing, it's important. Um, I think it's very interesting, and I'm not an AI bull at the current stage, and I think that much is clear. But I do think AI will have the first. I mean, we're seeing it in other sectors. Will have the first applications actually in sales and marketing functions. It's the most transactional part and the one that is the least connected to what's happening on construction side and the pre-con to it. So I do think there's a very interesting case there. Very specific trends with regard to the sales side of it. I would have to punt on that because I haven't met too many founders who have actually educated me on how I should think of it.
Guys, what I
Yeah.
And
would
that's my
say
job in the end.
is we have an episode coming out in maybe 2 weeks' time with Scott Wolf, who was the founder of Level Set, which sold to Procore for
That was a
500 mil, and
heavyweight.
he gives some very good
Mm.
sales and marketing strategies
Yeah,
in that
but
episode.
also on this all strategies, I think if you don't have a good product, you can think
Sorry,
about
what
all.
was Anton's question about strategies or was it about technologies for sales?
Construction technology sales,
Ah,
emerging
okay.
trends in construction technology sales.
Mm,
Hey, Anton, we'll invite you on here and you can give us the sales playbook.
yeah. There's also two more questions I can see, or maybe even more than that. Three.
What? Oh, I
On
missed these.
Yeah. What about 1,5 model with outcome as a service? That from Mo.
I think, Mo, that's inherently what it is because 1,5 is assuming the risk of actually installing the rooftop PV. So I would classify them as outcome as a service actually already in the current model.
Mhm. Alex is asking now, the concern with outcome as a service is venture generalists trending to value companies at less X than for standard SaaS. Do you agree with this statement? Is this a tougher sell to get right funding?
In the end, okay. First of all, I wouldn't be worried how venture capitalists value my company. I would only be worried how the public markets or the exit markets value my company because, in the end, the venture capitalists will derive. We're a pretty simple bunch and simple profession. We will always derive with a little bit of a delay how the public markets will value our companies, how we should be valuing them. So that's just a general clarifying comment. Now, how the public markets will value this. Um, I like to think of it in terms of first principles, Alex. So why do SaaS companies that have a recurring revenue model get valued at an average whatever 10x? The reason is in the first principles because think of it like this: retention is cheaper than acquisition. The more revenue I can retain, the cheaper the cost for the next euro of revenue will be because I don't have to acquire it with a lot of cost and effort, etc. So in the end, the fundamental principle behind valuing ARR companies relatively highly is that retention is cheaper than acquisition. There are a few other reasons, but that is the core reason. So if you can have a model where your next euro that gets your dollar that gets acquired is actually cheaper than the previous one that you acquired, you will get valued with the exact same multiple. Cloud infrastructure companies, fintech companies have different multiples, have different multiples, but actually the next dollar that they acquire is relatively cheap. And that's why they can also reach insane scale. So that's the principle I like to think of it. And when I think of OAS companies, that's also the question. One of the questions I have to ask myself: hey, will this company be able to produce and distribute outcomes at such an enormous scale that the next, first of all, that they grow quickly at some point, and secondly, that they can distribute the next dollar for cheaper cost than they did the previous ones? And several of the OAS companies that I know can actually do that. Sometimes brand plays a role. Sometimes it is that the market is just insanely big and the product is perfectly fit for it, etc. So these are the kinds of plays that have a potential to be valued in the same valuation range because they satisfy one of those first principles.
Very good.
Okay.
Last one from Mo, and then we'll wrap this up. Will be what about 1,5 model with outcome as a service? Made up example, a highly tech enabled structural engineering firm with AI, which starts out in a region but then buys more and more other engineering firms and delivers service but with much better
I want
margins.
to back that firm. Exactly. I'm
Ah,
actively looking for these.
Hmm.
Absolutely.
Martin, I think you are the preeminent person to start such a firm.
Yeah, 100%. I
And
mean,
again, this, by the way, sorry, Mo, I love that you bring this up, Martin, because this is exactly what the topic of fixed cost versus variable cost is. So you are selling variable cost into the P&L of your client. Martin, your clients don't want your man hours. They
hmm,
want your stamp, they want your design, they want your engineering, they want your report, they want your file, and they want your stamp. And
yeah.
that's why they pay good for it
So
if
I
they're
think,
good clients.
And they want your athletic body,
And now
most
what?
of all.
Yeah, the guns, exactly. And now if Martin manages to replace the person hours that it costs him to produce variable person hours into fixed costs, that's how you get the spread that I was talking about. I love
hmm,
Mo that you're bringing this up. Thanks for clarifying.
I think it needs to be a specialist activity within engineering rather than general engineering because it's just way too broad, complicated, and depends
Yeah.
on the regions. So
Oh.
maybe actually not, but I always see bias a little bit. But I think definitely that's something I would love to be.
There's a I want to also give an example here because Mo, what you're describing is, I think, bang on. And here's an example. I will not give the name because I'm hoping to invest in the company at some point, and I keep my things to myself or whatever. It's a firm that we here at Fundamental are tracking, and the firm started developing something like CAD software for structural engineering for a specific target group. And they build good software, but they struggle to sell it. Why? Outcomes. The answer is always outcomes. People don't want to change the behaviors. They already
Hmm.
have software, blah, 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 blah.
Yes.
And then this company realized, well, but actually they are purchasing the report. Either their customers or the customers that we were trying to sell to were purchasing these structural engineering designs. So now they said to some of these customers, hey, can we actually sell this, etc.? Yeah, I'm buying this 100 times a year at a price point between 5,000 to 15,000 per house. Okay, we can do that. So now they use their own software to produce that. They found out that they can do the exact same report and file in a 90% reduction time reduction. So the engineer of their competitors would need 36 to 40 hours to produce that kind of outcome, and they needed 4
Hmm.
by using their own software. Previously, they tried to sell this advantage. Hey, you have a 90% inefficiency reduction. Why don't you adopt it? Yeah, but I have my ways, blah, blah, blah. Now they started to switch the model. And what are they doing? They are replacing 90% variable cost with very few fixed costs, but they are selling variable cost into the P&L of their clients. And that's exactly what I'm talking about.
Beautiful.
Beautiful. Guys, thank you for all your questions. We will be here at the same time, same place next week. So please get involved. We'll post the subjects early next week. And Patrick and Martin, thank you. Let's go and enjoy our supper.
Supper.
Thank you. I will now start my photo album with photos of Martin.
Okay, let's do it. Let's do it.
Looking forward to seeing you next week.
You
Cool.
guys
Thank you,
take
guys.
care. Bye bye. That
Good.
was
That
very
was
good.
very good.
Yeah. It's actually the
Yeah,
magic
that's
of